Welcome to the Manifest Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Norma Reyes, a Latina career and life coach. With this podcast, I help successful women learn how to combine their intuition and logic so that they can manifest their dream career. By listening to my podcast, you'll learn how to go from feeling stuck and lost on what to do next to having the clarity, motivation, and strategies to manifest the career of your dreams. Each episode, I'll teach you the skills, strategies, and mindset you need, girl, to get in alignment with your career goals. Now let's go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, welcome back. This is episode 13, and today my guest is Loraine Martinez Bellamy. She's a lawyer turned life and business coach. She helps multi-passionate women start and grow their business alongside their 9-to-5s. And her coaching program teaches women how to become powerful decision makers, ditch self-doubt and overwhelm, so that they can share their magic with the world. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait for everyone to hear all about you and your career journey.
I'm so happy to be here. So happy to chat with you.
Thank you. All right. Can you tell us about your family background? Where did you grow up and whom did you live with?
So I was born in Guayama, Puerto Rico, and I think I was 6 months old when my parents moved to Connecticut, which is very different. Not just in weather, but in culture and everything. And this was in the 80s. I'm 37 now, so it was probably 1984. And I grew up in Connecticut, Hartford area, most of my life. And then we moved to like a suburb of Hartford. And I lived with both of my parents, most of my childhood. They did have a 3-year split in between, and then got back together, which is just, But so 2-parent household. I had 2 younger siblings, 3 girls total, but then I also had 3 older siblings from my dad's previous marriage, and then 1 relationship. So I was kind of smack in the middle, but in terms of my personality, I'm very much like the oldest because I'm like the oldest of the second generation of children.
Okay. I understand that. Yes. My 2 older sisters are from a previous marriage. And everyone that says middle children have issues because they're like that we have to make up our own thing. But I swear, I'm like the first middle only child because my sisters are like 5 years and 4 years older. And then my brother's like 5 years younger. So there is a time, I'm special.
Yeah, you had some time away. So my older siblings are 9, 8, and 6 years older than me. So they were definitely like, kind of like elementary school kids when I was born. But my sisters are close in age. Like one is 2 years and the other one's 3 years younger. But you had time to just flourish and be on your own and be the baby.
Yeah. I think it really does make a difference too when looking how people succeed through challenges. When you have that extra attention from your parents, it really does make a difference. So when you were young and people asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up, what do you recall telling them?
I remember I wanted to be a fashion designer for a time, and that was short-lived because I was probably like in 4th grade when I asked my mom for that Crayola like fashion design set where you had the stencils and the colored pencils to kind of do your sketches. So between that time and like freshman year of high school when I took my first fashion design class and realized that I don't have dexterity for like sewing or really anything else crafty. All of my superpowers are in my brain. And I almost failed fashion design, even though I was like basically a straight A student in high school. And my mom's like, what is this elective that you're taking that you're doing so awful in? And I'm like, I messed up my like sewing and all this stuff. So that was short-lived. I also remember thinking that I wanted to be an accountant, but that was probably because my parents both had accounting backgrounds. And then I think one that's kind of merged into where I am now is I wanted to be not a journalist, but like a writer of some sort, like a writer for a magazine or an editor. I was very into like magazines and reading, total bookworm my entire life, like read dozens of books a year when I was like a kid and a teen and loved magazines too back in the day, like 17 magazine, Cosmo Girl, and all this stuff. And I remember thinking, when I grow up, I want to be like one of these like writers in New York City and like have access to like all the fun fashion and beauty products and all of that. So kind of all over the place now that I think about it.
That's good. That's good. It's good when we are allowed to explore, because a lot of times some people don't have that option. And when we explore early, we feel less like a failure later when we're trying to
That's
explore.
true. Very true.
I like that you were able to just explore a lot. Did you have any early career models that you imagine yourself being like, and what kind of work did they do?
My mom was very crafty, so I'm assuming that's why I thought that I could be a fashion designer. I mean, she didn't sew, so I don't know where I got that I'd be good at that, but she was very like, she's a great cook and chef. Was great at decorating parties, at hosting parties, and she was always very creative and very supportive of like our creativity and imagination. And I'm trying to think if I had any other role models. My older siblings like were in and out of my life, so I didn't really know what their actual life was about. But let me see if I can think of anybody else that I kind of looked up to in terms of like creative ventures. I don't know, everyone in my family, and you may resonate with this too, was just like working really hard. And the creative things that people did were mostly out of necessity, out of like needing to save money for birthday parties or, DIY before that was like the cool thing to do. So a lot of like, I just remember a lot of our parties and family parties, just kind of people cobbling things together and like crowdsourcing different things. And there is a saying about that, right? Like creativity is the something of like need. I can't remember the exact saying, but when you need to come up with ways to do things more cheaply or within a budget, I think that also fosters a lot of creativity, especially within our community.
Yeah, you made me think about, like, aside from parties, I mean, quinceañeras, before people were
Mhm.
spending millions, or I guess not millions, thousands of dollars, but it's maybe somebody's spending millions, not me.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, it made me think about that, and everyone kind of sponsored something, and it was really
Mhm.
a family party, not just solely about the quinceañera herself.
Absolutely. Like the cake, somebody would make the cakes. I remember my mom would make like the decor for the tables for our parties, our quinceañeras, and also like other people's parties and stuff. I remember being at the dollar store and like sourcing like things that were cheap that you can then create into more beautiful things. And now it's like there's a whole DIY crafting culture. But back then, I definitely think it was more of necessity than anything else.
Yeah, yeah. And what you can make can usually be so much better than what you could find somewhere.
Mhm.
All
For
right.
sure.
So now, can you tell us about your educational background?
Yeah. I went to straight from high school. I decided I was just going to put in my college application that I wanted to be in the business school. I went to UConn in Connecticut. And that ended up being great because then I didn't have to apply for the business school with everybody else in like sophomore year to get into it. I was just kind of like in there. And I loved business. I was a management international business major. And the major that I picked within business was more of the like soft skills, like how to develop people, how to develop leadership, how to develop leaders, more of the organizational culture and the collective study of business and people and organizations, which I really enjoyed. And during business school, I took a couple business law classes and became interested in the law, something that had kind of always been in the back of my mind because my skills were always reading and writing. And that's really what you do as a lawyer. So I decided to apply to law school, and then I took a year off because I wasn't sure if it was the right move or not. And I was a paralegal for a year to see if it was something that I was interested in doing. And when you're deciding whether to go to law school, it's a huge financial investment, and more than that, definitely a different culture than undergrad in terms of studying, the rigor that you have to put into your studies. And I kind of like floated by in undergrad because I thought it was incredibly easy. Like I don't remember doing any actual work, which probably means that I was going to a school that was like easy for my level of intelligence. But I had a great time during undergrad. But I do remember thinking it's going to be different for law school. Like it's going to require more work. So I loved having the year to see if this is something that I'm even interested in doing. And I had the pleasure of working with attorneys that really loved teaching and mentoring people. It could have gone either way. Like I could have ended up working with attorneys that were assholes and then never decided to be a lawyer. But the attorneys I worked with were great mentors. And I decided to go to law school, and I ended up at the University of Maryland in Baltimore on a school that I love. And it was the perfect fit for my personality and what I was trying to do going forward. But I did go into law school thinking I was going to be like a big firm corporate lawyer in business transactions, attorney. And that was not the case, because I started law school in 2007. And a year later, the world fell apart, the economy crashed, and all of those fancy jobs that we thought we were going to have waiting for us after graduation were gone. As the businesses reduced expenses and shut down, they didn't need legal support anymore, or it was the thing that they could cut back on. So a lot of my friends that had job offers already and thought they were going to be set, either were deferred for a certain amount of time and couldn't start their jobs, or, the offers were pulled altogether. So during law school, it was kind of like we didn't know what was going to happen when we graduated. The plans that we had originally had in mind were totally different. Luckily, I was in the DC, Baltimore area. So the federal government in 2010, when I graduated, was the only person probably that was hiring, or entity that was hiring. And I was able to get a job at a federal agency, which I was really grateful for at the time.
Wow, I really love that you took that year to test it out, because sometimes we jump in from undergrad to master's and then realize it's not something that we really want to do. And the fact that you liked your undergrad, or it was easy, just own it. I mean, I feel for myself, I struggled in the beginning in my undergrad, mostly because I didn't really know what I wanted to do or what I really liked. But I mean, if I had what you're describing, right, like the dynamics of like people development, I would have loved something like that. I mean, in my undergrad, I ended up being in psychology, which is all about development. And that really has stuck with me over the years. All that I learned, I really absorbed that the most. But it took me 3 major changes to know that's what I wanted to do. And then, in your program, that you experience that sudden change of like, well, what am I going to do? Because, but then, you were flexible. That's really important, to be flexible. And you took that job. So tell us about that. How was that experience going from law school into your first job after that?
Yeah. So like I said, I was just grateful to have a job, because so many of my classmates did not have jobs and ended up like bouncing around, like substitute teaching, bartending, doing just odd jobs to keep themselves afloat after. Because even though I was lucky enough that undergrad, I didn't have any debt coming out of it. And law school, I got a scholarship that covered almost all my tuition, but living expenses they like add up. And I used to work part-time during law school, but it's really hard. Nor would I have wanted to work full-time during law school, because I just know myself. So I had to take out a sizable amount of debt to be able to live and finish school. And then after you have the pressure of this debt over you. And I remember just being happy that I had a job so I could pay my bills. And I was hopeful that it would be something interesting. It was nothing that I had originally been interested in. But the most amazing thing about it was that I just met like awesome people there. Like one of my best friends, we met on the elevator on our first day of work, because somebody said something in the elevator, and it was just like one of those awkward human moments, and we both made the same face, and like we happened to be looking at each other, and we just busted out laughing, because I'm like, okay, clearly you're my people if you thought that was weird or it was funny. I can't remember exactly what it was. But we came out of that elevator like friends, and over the next few years just like grew as professionals. And neither of us liked the job after a while. After we were trained and started doing the actual job. Federal government is, if you can find a place where you feel good, it's great because you have total job security. It's pretty consistent. You're consistently going to get raises and if you're doing well, be promoted. But it's a thing that I think a lot of people go through where it's like you get accustomed to a certain salary range or a certain, style of living. And I remember being 2 years in and just over it. Like I just did not like my job. I really hated my job. I dreaded it like every single week. And I knew that if I didn't make a move that in the next year, that my salary would keep increasing and I would learn how to cope better at the job. And I probably would never leave it, just because of the security and the guarantee of like, being comfortable. So I remember thinking, it's like now or never. Like I need to make right now before, my benefits and my salary get even better. And then the pressure of taking like a huge pay cut keeps a lot of people from doing the stuff that they really want to do. So I started looking around, and at that point I was dating my husband who was back in Connecticut. And we were just at the beginning of a relationship, long distance, and actually worked really well for us, given how independent we are and how much we had going on in our lives and still do now. The long distance worked well. But I started looking in Connecticut and I was like, I wonder what I could do back home. I could move back. I could save more money. It's so much cheaper to live there. And I found a position at a nonprofit. And that was like, spoke perfectly to my strengths as an attorney. And I remember stalking them when the position came out, because I had seen it, but it was a position that had been filled a year before, but it still came up when I Googled. Like I probably typed in the stuff that I like to do as a lawyer, and that position came up. Then I saw them open it again, and I was like, oh my God, this is my chance to apply. And I applied. I got an interview pretty quickly. I came home and interviewed for it. And then I remember kind of badgering them. Like my boss, in retrospect, always reflects it as like, you were like this close to being annoying, but like not, like you were persistent and you pushed it like right before you were annoying. The reason was because I needed to figure out if I was going to sign a new lease in DC or if I was going to get a job in Connecticut, in which case I didn't want to go into a new lease. So they didn't know that. And I didn't want to put that type of pressure on them, but I was like, let me know soon so I don't get into this new lease. But that's how I decided to move back home and to shift from government work into nonprofit.
Nice. Sounds like an adventure. I'm sure there was lots of adventures. And I really liked how you talked about we start getting really comfortable, federal jobs, state jobs, those types of things, like you said, increases, and then it's secured. So I like that you just recognize that. Sometimes people don't recognize it at all until, 5 years comes around and it's already pretty deep in there and you kind of feel like, okay, well, where am I going to find something else? But I challenge everyone listening that even though we may feel that way, it's not really reality either. We might feel not able to find something, and maybe you take a pay cut for a little while, maybe a year, and then later your salary actually increases way more than possible in your previous employer or field.
Absolutely. And I think it's important too that we do those things when we're able to, because I think for a lot of us, we feel a lot of pressure, in our 20s to be successful and to be producing and stuff. And then now in retrospect, I feel like I had such few responsibilities then, even though I felt like I did, like I felt like I needed to make my parents proud and I need to be financially independent and I need to save money and I need to do this and that. But being able to do that when it's just you, like I was single, I didn't have any children yet. Yeah, I had like student loan debt and I probably had credit card debt from vacations. I probably couldn't afford during law school and undergrad and took anyway. But it wasn't, it wasn't the adulting that you then really step into when you start building a family, whatever that may look like for you. So giving yourself the grace of knowing that there's flexibility and you can't mess it up, right? As long as you or tuning into what you're desiring and being responsible for yourself in life. Even though I was super adventurous in my 20s, I still wish that I was less hard on myself about how together I needed to have it, because frankly, you have all of the rest of your adulthood to have it together and to get it together, whatever that means. So, like, I feel like your 20s and 30s, should be a time for you to explore what makes you happy and how you can serve in the world, rather than having this like nonstop pressure on yourself to produce. But it's something that's hard for us to balance, as Latinos, because we are trying to close gaps and financially, educationally, in many different ways for our people and for the generation that comes after us. So there is an additional amount of pressure than maybe our white colleagues and friends and classmates. They I think in many ways feel less pressure to achieve.
Yeah, it can be definitely hard with the pressures. I was thinking, yeah, 20s, we definitely feel this extra pressure, especially when you see other people. And I think right now, like the holy grail is to be able to say you're making six figures,
Mhm.
whatever that means. And I mean, you might be able to make six figures in places where you need six figures to survive.
Exactly.
You know, if I'm making six figures here in Texas, I am
Yeah,
balling.
I know, seriously. And my husband and I were just talking about this as we were walking home from dinner last night. I was like, I don't know how people live in this city without making six figures. Like, six figures is like the bottom that you can do to live, like to be able to pay rent in Boston. So it's true. It means different things in different cities.
Yeah, yeah. We should really focus more on is just inner happiness, whatever that means for the person, and taking that time.
Yeah.
Because now that I'm definitely much more into like meditation and being in alignment and, my chakras and all of those
Hmm.
things, I
Yeah.
think, and I'm trying to squeeze in meditation every day, at least 5 minutes with my kids,
Hmm.
husband, work, business. And so I'm like, what did I do with my time when I was so not?
I do think that it's some of that desire for stability and independence and more financial gain and stuff is because a lot of us, and I don't want to make this like a blanket statement, because I feel like there's many Latinos that were raised with abundance and plenty of money. But for a lot of us, we grew up, being very aware that we did not have enough money. And so we're seeking as adult that security of being able to kind of exhale by hitting whatever your personal markers are, and being able to have savings or to have a certain prestigious title or education or whatever. And then almost always I see with my clients that I coach, when they turn about 30 and they've done those things and they feel good in their careers, that's when they allow themselves to exhale and be like, oh, so what makes me happy? And I remember having that same existential crisis, because I'm like, I just worked so freaking hard for all of these things. Now I have the things and I feel like a void in my heart, like I should be doing something more or different. And that created like a sense of guilt, because I'm like, on the one hand, who am I to want more than all of the amazing things I have in my life already? And on the other hand, like, do I have to take my whole life apart now that I worked so hard to put together in order to be happy because I picked the wrong thing, like along the way? Those were the questions going on in my mind, like as soon as I turned 30. And I see it so much with my clients.
Yeah, yeah, you're so right. I was thinking the same thing as you're saying it. It's so true. We are so busy chasing a goal, and then once we get there, we may begin to start feeling, right? And on sometimes what we do too is we reach a certain goal and we start feeling that void. And instead of recognizing and taking a pause, we might set another bigger, better goal. And it'll just be the same thing. It reminds me of a
Mhm.
book I read. I can't think of what it's called, but he basically talks about that. It's like the happiness equation. That's what it was in that book. So now tell me about some of your networking experiences that have helped in your career development. You did talk a little bit about doing the year of being a paralegal and you had some mentorship, were they able to help you later in your career?
So because I didn't go back to Connecticut right after law school and I stayed in the DC, Maryland area, I was in contact with them and that they knew I was doing well in law school and I graduated and everything, but I didn't end up coming back to Connecticut. I think if I did, they probably would have hired me or, at least connected me if I was looking for a job with somewhere to go. But I think one thing that would be good, for people to know as they're moving is, or moving around and moving and shaking in the world of either academics or elsewhere. Like when I was applying for law schools, I really wanted to be in the DC, Maryland area, and there's many, many law schools there. And I was waitlisted. I think I was waitlisted originally at Maryland, where I ended up going, but I got into Temple and I got a really great scholarship there. And I almost went to Temple in Philadelphia. But when I went to Philadelphia, it just didn't feel, it's a beautiful city, but it didn't feel like where I wanted my next home to be. And to this day, when I land in Baltimore and DC, I feel like I'm home, even though I'm from Connecticut. It's just, there's certain cities and areas that really speak to your soul. And that's the one for me. I still want to move back there at some point in my life. So I got waitlisted at Maryland, and I remember reaching out to admissions, and I noticed that their dean of admissions was Puerto Rican and gay. And I just felt like a kindred spirit because, one, there's not a lot of Puerto Ricans in administration and education in that area at all. And then to be, a Puerto Rican man and openly gay was just like so different to me. So I remember just reaching out to him directly, expressing my interest in going to the school, letting him know that I was on the wait list, letting him know my leadership experience in undergrad, how involved I was in the Latino community in undergrad, how much I valued it. And it just turned out that they were really pushing to bring more Latinos into the law school because Maryland and Baltimore and DC in general, there is a lot of diversity because there's a lot of Black people who are very well placed and well regarded and, just are moving up in all of the industries, which I loved. I loved the diversity of the school, but there wasn't that many Latinos enrolling in law school at Maryland because it was a different kind of demographic. Whereas in California and Texas and New York and Connecticut, the Latinos that are there are kind of like second generation, third generation further. So they've kind of furthered their families along. In the Maryland, DC area, a lot of the Latinos are like, first generation or recent immigrant. So they were looking to really infuse more diversity with specifically Latinos in Maryland. I didn't know that, but I just went the extra mile to express my interest. And after speaking to him and some of the other administrators and having like a personal interview with them on the phone, I was able to get off the wait list and get a scholarship because they wanted me to go there because of my leadership skills and soft skills. And I mean, I was qualified in other ways, but you could be very qualified for different schools and still not get in, especially now. So remembering that sometimes the things that, when we're competing in different industries, we forget about the things that make us special and the things that bring us joy. Like I did a lot of extracurriculars in college just because I thought it was fun. And I had leadership in high school and in college, and then eventually in law school, I was the president of the Latino Law Students Association. And, there's you being able to highlight the things that make you different and unique, even though it's uncomfortable sometimes to brag about ourselves, can be the little extra mile that you need to get where you want to go.
Yeah. And taking that extra step, I'm sure showed a lot because there's a lot of people who end up on a wait list and that's it. Like they just see it as a closed door. And,
right.
It's like it's not a fully closed door. You still have the little bit open,
I always make sure to tell people that because I'm like, no, I mean, it's a waiting room. So you have to make yourself seen and heard and continue to express, your interest in the school and find ways to, get people to talk about you. And once he said he wanted to get on the phone with me and some of the other admissions people, I knew I was going to be good, because that's another thing that I've been able to step into as a strength is I'm able to connect with people pretty easily, and I'm pretty empathetic, and I have charming qualities that allow me to connect with other humans in a way that helps us and serves us both. So once I had the interview, I'm like, oh, I have this in the back. And I was so excited to go there, and just did so much for the school and the community while I was there. So I'm sure he felt like he got his money's worth.
Well, and even just what you were saying, you went in confident, like, oh, I got this, right? And we have to remember that we got to pump ourselves up because, I always think about like when you apply for a job, the first step is your resume. So you got to make sure your resume is good enough because that's your first thing. And then after your resume and you get that interview, no longer need to be stressing out about whether you qualified. You're qualified or you wouldn't have the interview. So remember that. Pump yourself up. I am
Absolutely.
qualified. And then you want to bring what you didn't put in the resume, right? There's other parts of you that aren't just words on a piece of paper. And that's what you really need to showcase. What makes you
Absolutely.
you aside from you being qualified? So,
Yeah.
hearing you take that in how you got in is just amazing. And, a waitlist is a waitlist, it's not a rejection. So we got to remember that too.
Yes, being able to really step into your magic, especially in competitive places. And like you said, a lot of people hear waitlist and they think, oh, well, some people got offended that they got waitlisted. And then they think, oh, I'm never getting off the wait list. But one, I got off the wait list. I turned the charm on. But a lot of that is learning how to step into your power and really own what makes you different and magical as a person. And as a coach now, I feel like I'm like everyone's eternal cheerleader. And the women I work with are just so powerful, so brilliant, so amazing at the work that they do in the different industries and in entrepreneurship. And having someone that can reflect that back to you when you forget, which happens to all of us, is so important, because when, like you were saying, when you apply for a job and you submit a resume and you get an interview, you're qualified. It's a personality contest after that. And my husband is in staffing. He's been in staffing most of his career. Now he's a director at a big staffing agency. So he deals in humans all the time. And he says that all the time too. And then it's a personality fit. Do you fit the values? Are you going to be someone that people are excited to collaborate with? And when I help people prep for interviews, it's really about hyping them up so that they remember all that they do at their current job, all that they've done over the course of their career, all that they've created. Because sometimes when we work in corporations, basically when we work for somebody else, we tend to give credit to the team and to the organization, which is awesome for the power of, collaborating well as a team. But at the end of the day, like being able to take credit for what you did and really own it and really highlight it, it's what's going to set you apart from the other candidate. And going in with the energy of like, I'm going to kill this. Like, I'm so good at this. I already know how I can affect change, how I can improve this company is so important. Because in an interview, the only thing that could keep you from getting the position is the energy you bring to the interview and the confidence or lack thereof that you bring to it.
Thank you. So now we're going to take it a little bit different. You've kind of talked a little bit about networking, and you talked about some mentoring that you had. What would you say now are some of the most influential experiences you've had in your career?
So I studied abroad twice in undergrad. I studied abroad in Spain for 6 months in Sevilla, which I love and adore Spain so much. And then I studied abroad in Italy in law school. And especially in law school, some people kind of side-eyed me, like, we're here in an academic rigor, degree, and you're like going to go spend those summer in Italy. But I knew from my experience in Spain that those are times, like being outside of your element and being in somebody else's comfort zone. Those are times in your life that will really transform how you see the world, how you see yourself within the world, and how you value just humans and relationships and culture and all of that stuff, which were super important to me as a young adult. And still to this day, I love to explore new places and go on adventures. But I think when I was 20 and I turned 21 in Barcelona. Having that time away from my family and from what I thought was the world at such a young formative age really kind of blew things open for me, because I realized that anything is possible. Anything that I wanted to create was possible if I was able to go off and enjoy myself and have a great time and learn a new culture and spend time with people that I didn't know from Jack when I got there, and really develop amazing friendships and travel the world and have the ups and downs of, being a young adult and being broke in Europe and wanting to do all of the things and trying to figure out ways to be resourceful and just live and enjoy yourself while you're doing it. I thought that was so impactful to me, to just be out of my little nest of what I knew. And now, as I talk to young adults and talk to teenagers and stuff, I just really suggest that you put yourself in environments that take you out of your normal day to day. And it can be kind of nerve wracking. My mom was she was like a helicopter mom before that there was a term for that, like she was very protective. Like in high school, like we did not have boyfriends. We weren't allowed to go to parties. Like it was just very protective. So when I told her, I set her up like my senior year of high school. I was like, just so you know, once I'm in college, I'm going to study abroad in Europe. And she's like, she was probably haunted by that thought for my first couple of years of college. And then junior year or sophomore year, when I decided to go junior year in the spring, I told her, and she was just so nervous, but she was also very supportive, and being able to kind of like fly the coop and see the world. And I was able to really learn who I was as a person without the parameters of parents and siblings and classmates and professors, and what I really valued. So I think some of my most impactful times in adulthood have been traveling. And even when I got back from studying abroad and said I wanted to move to Maryland, DC, everybody was like, why are you moving so far? I'm like, first of all, that's not that far. And how are you going to start over in a new city, like all by yourself? I just always knew and trusted myself that I could figure things out, and that's something that I think my mom did a really great job at instilling in us, was resourcefulness, being able to make your own judgment calls, and, being willing to be uncomfortable. Change has always been really exciting to me rather than it being stressful. I've always taken it on as like a challenge. So finding ways to get out of your rut is always useful.
Yeah, studying abroad. So that is something I wish I had done sooner. I didn't do it till my super senior year, because I took 5 years to finish. And that was part of it too, because it allowed me to do that study abroad, which happened to be paid for. Looking back, I was so concerned about collecting debt that I didn't do more study abroads.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for myself, my undergrad, I don't remember how much I came out in student loans, but currently I only have about 30,000 in student loans, and I have my PhD. So obviously I did a good job.
Yeah, you probably started a negative amount of money, because that's amazing. That means that somebody else paid for most of your education, which is great.
Yeah. But at the time, and it goes back to, we don't have that financial support from our families, and we kind of limit our experiences because of that, because we're thinking of that. And there's way to get free study abroads, because that's what I did get. I did get a free study abroad, and then they paid me while I was there to do some research. So,
where did you go?
I went to Guatemala.
Mm-hmm.
And it was doing, I think it was like I can't remember it. I'll put it in the show notes what it's called, because I'm sure it still exists. But it was, I think, the NSF, but it's like funding for, grant work. But they were doing a lot of grant work for undergrads, trying to get undergrads to be able to get experience doing research, studying abroad, and publishing. And so, those opportunities exist, and they actually were having issues finding people for it, because a lot of times, people don't know how to advertise these programs.
Right.
So we just got to ask questions. So I just happened to be taking a course where they were talking about it. I was taking a Latin American cultures course. It was like an elective. I wanted to learn a little bit more of that. And then that's how I found out about it. But if I hadn't taken that class, I'd have no idea, because they probably had one little flyer in one little hallway of the university. Hopefully it's gotten better, but I doubt it. I doubt there's a lot of.
You just gave me a flashback of bulletin boards. Remember when that's how we got information? Like, do you remember when people were looking for roommates and they just did like the little cutout things that you could rip off to take it and with the person's number? And now it's like, now you just put it on Facebook or somewhere and get a roommate.
Yeah. Well, now it's so different. And, to kind of go back a little bit, when you were talking about getting into law school, and you talked about the gentleman who was Puerto Rican and also gay.
Mm-hmm.
And during those times, so I graduated my undergrad in 2007, and wow, it doesn't seem that long ago. People still weren't that openly gay. I mean, it was becoming okay, but it really wasn't. And I'm sure there's still a lot of room for us to grow and move forward. And, in 10, 15 years from now, I would look back and be like, man, we still had a lot of room to grow. And it's just a progression. But to think about it, of course, it was a lot better than the 80s, but still in 2007, it still was taboo, very taboo.
Absolutely.
Especially in our culture too.
Yeah. Yes. Especially in our culture. I think we're still behind, the curve on that. And I just thought that him being so open about it, that he would really appreciate the things that I felt made me special as a student or as what I could contribute. So kind of finding your people wherever you go. And I always see networking as fun. Like, I never think about it as a means to an end. And I think a lot of times it's gotten a bad rap because people are trying to figure out, or they feel like somebody wants something from them, but then at the same time, they want something from somebody else. So instead, right? Like, yeah. So instead of being awkward about it, I see it even with Clubhouse and meeting new people. I just see it as like, I'm just meeting a new person that I could have met like at a bar, at an airport somewhere, but I'm deliberately doing networking this way right now. And I just want to hear what they have going on. And if it's something that I can help move along in any way, whether it's through my services as a coach, through my services as a lawyer, to my network of people that I know, then I do that. And if they have something that they can help me move something along, then they can offer that to me. So seeing it as more of a collaborative rather than this like give and take that feels very forceful and like forced, I think has also allowed me to just meet awesome people and just connect in a way that it's like, you never know. And you can meet someone right now and it just seems like what they do has nothing to do with what you do. And then you will cross paths later and be like, oh my God, that's so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how it should be. A lot of times we think of networking, it's pushed on us as a different thing. But when we go in with just learning and exploring and curiosity, then we're actually opening the door a lot wider than that narrow focus of like, what can you do? Or can you connect me with this? So
absolutely.
Now, were there any important frustrations? Sometimes we look at our important successes, but were there any frustrations that you felt like you needed to go through them to be able to move forward?
Yeah. I mean, what I was mentioning to you about turning 30 and then just realizing that I still felt like I had something else I should be doing or creating or offering. I mean, it would have been very easy to just continue to numb that feeling in me. And we numb in very many different ways. Like, I used to travel a ton. I used to have these luxury vacations with friends. I used to, like, spruce up my house, buy new stuff, go to Home Goods, like change this, change the decor. There's a lot. We all have our numbing behaviors. Go to happy hour, go check out a new restaurant. And a lot of times we're just trying to distract ourselves from what we're being called to do. And this isn't everyone. I always make the disclaimer and the caveat that if you're happy with your life, please do not let me convince you that there's something more that you should be doing. This is for the people that you know who you are, who feel called to do something bigger or more. And the calling just gets louder and louder until it's like deafening and you do something about it. So I remember being so frustrated because I had this call to do more, but I'm like, what the heck am I supposed to do? Like, am I supposed to start a new career? Am I supposed to like do this? Am I supposed to like, I was just so confused about what it was. And the reason I was so confused was because I was so used to following a really linear career path about how things were done. Like you go to school, you get good grades, especially if you decide you want to be a lawyer. This is what the path sounds like. People ask me now, they're like, my high school kid is interested in going to law school. And I'm like, cool. He or she needs to get the best grades they can get in high school so that they can get into the best college that they can get into. And then once they're there, they need to get the best grades they can get in college so that they can get into the best law school. So it's a total meritocracy, you know, in that way, if you decide on these traditional careers. But for those of us who are looking for security and stability, it's really attractive because you're like, I just got to work hard and hit that mark and hit that mark and then hit that mark. So when you get to the place in your life where you're like, this fuzzy, weird calling on my life that I have, and I don't know what the first step is, and I don't want to look stupid. I'm already an established professional in my career. Like, what am I thinking of, like being an entrepreneur or changing careers completely? And our inability, because we can't see all of the steps of the process, we just don't take any steps. So that frustration of feeling confused and called to do more, but having no freaking idea what that's supposed to be, and then ignoring it for a few months and numbing out and then feeling the same in a few months again. I think that frustration has what allowed me to really step into coaching and to help people navigate that same frustration, especially the people like me, the women like me that are more linear thinkers and are more used to picking like the safe path and the secure path. How to create a thought environment that fosters creativity and allows you to be curious and take a step and maybe look silly and still be willing to do it. I just feel like that's my life's work. So coming from that frustration and being willing to feel uncomfortable and trust that the answer was coming is what led me to coaching, which is like, I feel like my greatest gift to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. You just described a lot of my own thinking. I definitely was very linear. I mean, I don't think you get a PhD and not be a linear type person for the most part.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly.
There's some creative PhDs out there, like super creative. So now because I want to hear all about your coaching and how you got from, being a lawyer to starting your coaching business. But before that, was there any missed opportunities? I always like to ask that question. Like, was there anything that you wanted in regards to your career development, maybe a position or working for a certain company, and then you didn't get it? And looking back, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't get that because I would have not liked to be in that situation. You're laughing. So
when I was done with business school, my internship, I think I mentioned it to you before we started recording, here in Boston, where I live now, was with Verizon Corporate. And it was like so boring. Like I wanted to like rip my hair out. It was just so boring, very like they were working on Fios, which is mind blowing now. And now that I'm in Boston, we actually have Fios internet here. And this internet is like mind-blowingly good. Like it never glitches, it never drops. It's amazing, right? So that's what Verizon was working on as a corporation. What I was going to end up doing is some sort of middle management position. And I was just like, I can't do that. That is like the most boring summer I've ever spent in my life. But coming out of undergrad in 2006, like they offered me like, I think 65 grand to start or something like that. And I'm like, that is way more money than most of my friends were being offered back then for like an entry level position in a corporation. And I mean like the benefits and all the good stuff. And I was just like, I don't know. I can't even tell you because this really did not go with my linear personality. Like the person in me that's like a safety seeker would have totally taken that job. But I'm so happy that I had the forethought to be like, I am not going to spend my youth in that office, like freezing to death with no natural light. Like, I want to do something else.
It was your intuition. Your intuition was like, no,
do not put me in there. And, coming from my family, like and my parents were very supportive in that they raised us to make our own judgment calls, and they really did respect what we decided to do, and supported us in what we decided to do. But you kind of had to have a plan, and you needed to, like, I mean, we're adults at the end of the day. They couldn't force me to take the job, but I remember telling them, like, I wanted to be a lawyer. I want to go to law school. I want to take a year off and work as a paralegal. Taking years off to Latino parents too is like, they're looking at you like, a year off from what? You aren't doing it. Like, like they don't really value that we're like busting our ass at
Right.
school. A year off from what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take a year off and work. And like, if you're willing to work and stuff, they're more on board with it. But they were supportive, and I think they trusted me enough to support me in that decision. So I'm so glad I didn't take that middle management job that would have sucked the life out of me, and that I decided instead to do something different, equally secure, but different.
Yeah, yeah. There's something that came to mind when you were talking about, the no windows. In my undergrad, I worked at a computer lab. It was a Mac lab, and they didn't have any windows, and it was like really interior of this art building, which is kind of funny that it didn't have any windows. And that's where I knew, I was like, I cannot work in a place that doesn't have windows. So I only did it for about a semester, and they were like, we'll give you whatever schedule you want, because I was really reliable. That was the other part. There's people always calling in, probably because nobody wanted to be in a windowless computer room in an art building. Like, this was the art department, Windows are so important. But yeah, it's where I learned I learned a lot of different things, especially with my first job. I learned that I needed a place I could talk. I actually realized that I needed to interact with people. And, and some people don't need that, but I know I need that.
Yeah. I was actually talking to a new client recently, and we were setting out like her wish list for her new job. And one of the things on her wish list was like, I would like multiple windows in my office. So it's more important than we think.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because one of my first jobs after undergrad, it was in a high rise with so many windows, but windows didn't solve the problem because, yeah, after about like 3 months, I hated it. And what's funny was when this guy started, he was like, this is the best job ever. I said, wait 2 months. I want to know what you think about it in 2 months. And one day out of nowhere, he comes and he tells me, he's like, you're right. And I don't know what it is about this job. It was just so mundane. And that's probably why they had to outsource it and constantly hire new people, because nobody likes it after so long. Well, there's some people that were there for a long time, but that goes back to that. Sometimes we just stick to things because that security, the reliability, and feeling like, well, what else am I going to do? But
yeah,
give up on yourself. There's plenty to be done. Tell me how.
Going back to what I was saying about my colleagues that I met at that first job, the reason I knew I made the right move in leaving within a few years is because one of my good friends is still there. He's moved to a different city and transferred to a different office. And it's slightly in a different capacity, but I remember about 5 years into him being there, having a conversation with him where it's like, it's impossible to leave now. I've mastered the job. It's so boring, but I've mastered it. So it feels like very little work to me. I've now gotten multiple raises, so I won't be able to find a job that matches this with the level of flexibility and lack of responsibility that I have here. And I'm like, I'm so glad I left.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that, yeah, we do get really comfortable with that flexibility. And I have to say, I was in a job like that some years ago too. And I was really afraid of losing my flexibility. But now I'm making twice as much money, actually more, and I still have the same amount of flexibility. So don't allow that fear to keep you there, is what I would say to someone and to myself. I'm so glad I took that leap of faith because, yeah, now I look back and I'm like, oh, aside from the good part of it was the flexibility, but it was low pay in the very toxic workplace.
Yeah.
So now I want to hear about how you went from being a lawyer, you're still doing that, but now doing your business coaching and coaching.
Yeah. So that little existential crisis that I mentioned before led me to think about ways in which I can help. And I've always been a problem solver. Like I mentioned, I'm very resourceful. I've always been that way. I've always been the person that people come to when they're trying to either plan something new or like make a shift in a career or whatever. So after a lot of soul searching, I was like, I feel like I'm just going to try coaching. And in retrospect, which is hindsight is 2020, I've been a coach my whole life. Like I'm the oldest girl in like a family of girls. I have cousins and siblings and people that I've been mentoring informally for my entire life. So the requirements of coaching and the skills that it required were just very natural to me, being able to connect with people, being able to empathize with them, helping them, gain clarity in their own head and get in tune with how they want to feel, and then helping them structure a plan, not just a written plan, because I love goal setting as much as the next girl. I'm a huge journaler. I love writing things down. But sometimes we set the written plan, the strategic plan, and we forget to set up the thought plan and the thought environment in our head that's going to support us showing up to do what we said we were going to do day after day until we hit the goal. So as a coach, that's what I do now is I help people like get out of their own way and also learn where like their self-sabotaging behavior is. And I still practice law 9 to 5, and I built my coaching practice alongside my legal job over the course of the last 3 years in a very me way. And this is what I want to empower your listeners to do is to not feel like it needs to be all or nothing. If you're feeling called to some form of entrepreneurship or creative endeavor, being willing to get curious about it and follow your curiosity step by step, take that first step, but without needing to know how the project or business is going to end or how it's going to be ultimately when you are successful, quote unquote. Especially because if you're someone that's going to keep your 9 to 5 while you're doing it, or whatever your traditional job is, then you won't be putting the stress and pressure of supporting you financially and supporting your family financially on this new business or on this new project that you're doing, which gives your mind a lot more space to be creative, to do a lot of trial and error, which is all entrepreneurship is made out of, is like trying something, evaluating what worked, what didn't work, what would you do differently next time, and pivoting the next time around. So being able to have the stability of maintaining your lifestyle while building this alongside is so useful, and I think such a enjoyable way to build a business. Now, there are some people where it's like they are all or nothing. They don't have the ability to focus on two things at once or whatever the case may be. And I think the normal narrative in entrepreneurship serves them well. Like take the leap, quit your job and go forward. But I want to be a stand for the people that are like, I'm interested, I'm not willing to be broke, because that's me. And you get to you've worked hard, like you get to a certain point in your life where you're used to a certain lifestyle. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice that. I was like, I'll just build this alongside this. Now that I'm a mom, I have a 1-year-old or almost 1-year-old in a week. There's demands on my time much more than before. So now is a time where I'm starting to think, I've created this vehicle and this vessel that can grow. How can I grow it in a way that's sustainable and exciting and still keeps the work fun for me? But in the next year or so, or 2 years, can fully replace my 9 to 5 income and then some. So coming at it from a place of really abundance, then you can have both things. And then there will come seasons of life where both things are going to become harder to manage. But by then you will have created kind of like gotten past those first few years, because the first couple of years, especially the first year, is the hardest. That's when you're going to have the most self-doubt. That's when you're going to ask yourself over and over, is this worth my time? What am I doing? Is this like worth it? Is this helping anyone? What is this a pipe dream? And then after that, if you're still in it, you kind of lock in and you realize the reasons that you're doing it. You're able to tune into that very easily. There's less of the emotional roller coaster of entrepreneurship, and you kind of just accept that you're going to have days where you feel like you're killing it, and then you're going to have days that are like, what exactly am I doing with myself?
Yes, entrepreneurship is all of that. I also have my 9 to 5 still, and doing my business. And I think, it comes with waves too. Like you'll be feeling super successful and then you'll, feel really down. And there was something someone said, I don't remember who it was, but which is what I pass down to my own clients as well, is your 9 to 5 is your first investor. A lot of times people want to just, oh, well, there are those people who are like, I'm leaving, I'm done with my 9 to 5. And, I made a $10,000 a month, and, those people may exist or they may not. But, what works for you, only you know. And we can't just be hating our 9 to 5 that's providing for us and giving us a lot of luxuries. I enjoy my 9 to 5, but like you said, I knew there was a piece of me that needed something more for myself. I don't know if I had that feeling at 30. I'm trying to remember. I think I was in the middle of my PhD program. So no, I didn't have time to think about that. And I was having my first son. It was after having my second son that I started feeling those feelings. What's really funny is I was talking to one of my friends and telling him, I feel like I'm getting connected to my higher self and all this spirituality stuff, right? That we all kind of start encountering when we're feeling these things like chakras, meditation, and is there more for me? And he like stops me, right? Because I'm like trying to tell him all this stuff that I've been discovering. And he's like, you've talked to me about this before. Do you remember that? And I'm like, I did. And he's like, yeah, when you were in your program, your PhD program. And I was like, what? And then I had to remember back, but that's what happens too, right? Like we kind of like awaken. And then I like to say we get back into the hustle and bustle and we put that in a pause. And then we come back. It came back in 2019. I had my baby. He's a really good baby, really good sleeper, really good, like everything. So I'm on maternity leave. He doesn't need a single thing from me. My husband, is doing his thing. Baby. Nobody needs me. I'm not working. I'm doing nothing. I was like, what do I do? So I started reading again. I'm a big reader too. I'm such a bookworm. And I just kept getting all of these like manifestation books coming up. And I hadn't thought about that. I didn't even have a real word for it before. And looking back, I'm like, oh, that's why. It's because I felt useless, and that happens, and it's okay too. I think a lot of people don't talk about those moments. Instead, we hide them or we stuff them down, and we don't verbalize them. And for me, that's when I was like, well, I'm going to start a business. And back in 2016, I had thought about doing a business, but I'm a licensed therapist, so I was going to be doing private practice. And then I got really scared. I started the process, I got really scared, and then I didn't. And now with my coaching business, I've been very like firm that I was going to keep it separate. But 2 weeks ago, I decided, I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I not using my professional license to do something more aside from my coaching? Because it's not just the coaching. And I have to say that I felt like, okay, the universe said, yes, this is what you should be doing. Because within within 5 days of listing on Psychology Today, I got my first client and scheduled and paid, like private pay, no insurance. And it's like, okay, I'm like, okay, well then I guess this is the direction. And not that I'm stopping coaching, because I'm still doing that and meeting with my first therapy client in a long time. I was like, oh yes, I remember why I like coaching. Not that I don't like the therapy, but it's just different. It's a lot more directive in coaching, and in therapy, it's a lot more allowing them to explore and, let them come to the conclusion, where in coaching, I can be a little more like, well, have you thought about this? And a little bit more guiding. So.
Yeah, because there's usually a goal in mind, whatever that might be.
A more concrete goal.
Exactly. I think with therapy, the goal is always to just feel better, because your client feels like shit, And I love therapy so much. I did it. The only reason I don't have a regular therapist right now is because she left private practice. Otherwise, her business still. I loved having someone to talk to with no goal. That was like a totally different vibe than coaching. But I think they're both so useful. And when you have both, like you really do feel unstoppable. There was one thing you mentioned about clarity and having that moment of inspiration a few years ago and then it coming back. I always tell my clients that clarity is so fleeting and inspiration is so fleeting. It's very much like a feeling and a sense and an idea. And if you run with it, you could create all sorts of things. And if you take your mind off of it for even a minute, it just floats away, and then maybe it comes back to you again, but maybe it doesn't. So I use that a lot to just explain the urgency of really stepping into what you want to do in the world when it occurs to you, rather than waiting for the perfect time or for when you have the money to invest in yourself and all of that, because it is very fleeting. And a lot of what we do is, if the idea comes to us and we have fear along with it, and we don't have anyone to support us through that fear, then we just distract ourselves, or we busy ourselves doing other things, and then until it shows up again. And I think that when you were talking about your 9 to 5 being, your first investor, I fully believe that and have lived it over the course of the last few years, because if I didn't have a 9 to 5, I wouldn't be able to afford like the support that I've gotten for myself, both in administrative support for the business, and then also, more importantly, and more of the money I've spent is just in getting my own coaching so that I can be a better coach. Where was I going to get the money to do that if I was just doing, so I really appreciate my 9 to 5 as an investor. And I remember when I shifted my thought from I'm so bored doing this work right now, which there was a moment of that, to I'm just so happy to be here and do this work so that I can invest in myself and in my business.
Yeah. So that's all of my questions. Was there anything that you wanted to share with the audience?
I would just reiterate, I feel like it's been the theme of this whole conversation. Like, if you have something on your heart and your spirit that you want to walk out, like, reach out to either of us. Like, we're both coaches, we're both doing the thing. And there are scary days, and there are days where you ask yourself, what are you doing? And days where you're tired and you have to show up for both things. But overall, like, I've never done something more fulfilling in my life than coach other humans to reach their goals and to create what they want to see in the world. So if there's something in your heart that feels that way for you, please reach out, or just take that first step for yourself.
Yeah. And how can they reach you?
So I hang out a lot on Instagram. And Norma will probably put my handle in the show notes. It's Lolly, LOLY_love. And yes, it has nothing to do with coaching, because it was just my personal account when I first started on Instagram, and I just never bothered to change it. And then I spent a lot of time on Clubhouse too, for those of you that are on there. My handle is Life Coach Lo, and you can find all about me, find out more about me and my programs at Loraine with 1R Martinez.com.
Okay, thank you. Yes, everything will be in the show notes and linked, but you guys can connect with her on Instagram and also DM me if you need to get connected with her. Thank you so much again. I loved hearing your story and just so many gems. I hope that you guys re-listen to it a couple of times, because I feel like there's so much in there. Thank you.
Yeah, this was so much fun. And I love your energy so much, because sometimes I need that grounding energy. Like, you have a very grounding energy. And I think sometimes when I'm recording or doing stuff with people that have my same like crazy energy, you don't get to some of the deeper thoughts. So I appreciate your energy so much, and being such a space holder for amazing things to come up.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that I didn't realize that was my superpower. I'm very able to, I have such a very, I hate to say flat affect, I'll say neutral affect. So really, I've just kind of, and I don't absorb either, right? Because there's people who are absorbing you, and that's a lot different. And I don't. I just kind of it kind of just like passes through me. It doesn't keep going.
Yeah, that's probably
like
what
a
makes you a
diffuser.
That's probably what makes you a great coach and therapist, because so much of our work is to hold space for silence, for thoughts, and for things to come up for people. And it's something that as a coach, I have to always work on, to listen more and shut up and just like hold the space for the person to come to their own realization. So yeah, own your gift, girl.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's good. Yeah, because I definitely will say, I know that therapy, being a therapist, being a coach is hard work, because you kind of take in a lot from the clients. But I've always been like, I've never really had an issue in letting things not fester within me, but probably because I'm able to just let it pass through. Now I have all kinds of thoughts going in my
head. I am. Now you're making me think, I wonder what your human design is, and like your astrological signs, because there are certain signs that are.
So I know them all. So my human design is I'm a generator, but I'm I think it's 1-3. think, like knowledge maker or something like that. For numerology, I'm a 1. And then for, so try to guess what my sun sign is. I don't think you'll be able to. Most people can't.
I feel like most people probably guess Libra, but it's probably something like Leo or something. What is it?
So I am a fire sign.
Okay. Are you an Aries?
No, I'm a Sagittarius.
You know what? I was gonna say Capricorn originally, but Sagittarius, I would not guess that you're a Sagittarius. But I bet your husband might guess.
No, he's a Taurus. So
okay. So he overcompensates in that department.
Yeah. So what I found was, because I mean I've always been like, yeah, Sagittarius, because I have a lot of Sagittarius in my chart, but my rising is Virgo, and I was like, oh,
that makes sense. Yeah.
I was like, that's what makes me more organized than a typical Sagittarius.
I feel like your moon sign says so much. Like, I'm a Pisces sun, and the dreamer part of me that you heard in my story, like that definitely goes with the Pisces part. But in terms of how I like live life and implement, I'm an Aries moon, and definitely like I implement from a place of fire too. So
yes, fire signs. Yeah, my youngest baby, he's a Leo. He's definitely a Leo. His rising is a Libra, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. That is interesting. I have a Taurus.
So, well, good luck there. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want a Taurus or a Leo. I already have a Taurus at home. I don't need another one.
Yeah, you don't need another one.
Well, this is great. I know that we could probably talk about this forever. Thank you so much
seriously.
again. And to the listeners, I will see y'all next week.
Thank you for listening to the Manifest Your Career podcast with me, your host, Dr. Norma Reyes, a Latina career and life coach.